Week 5 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking this week. So with a few good running backs on bye, there's going to be some guys that made this list, obviously, that most fantasy owners most likely wouldn't use on a regular basis. So number one, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, the best back in fantasy football. Last week, he put up 45 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And this week, I know it's a tough matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys, but if there's one weakness in this Cowboy defense, it's definitely the run defense, and I think McCaffrey once again has a monster game, and I got him in one. Number two, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Robinson, coming into the year, we knew he was going to be a solid running back and one of the better backs in fantasy football, and so far this season, he's had 3 games of 15 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues, and this week he's got a good matchup versus the Houston Texans, where I think he could take advantage of the young defense, make some plays. And we know this Atlanta team, their only chance to win games and not turn it over is run the football a whole lot. So this week, I think we're going to see a lot of volume and another good game here for Bijan. Number 3, Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. The Giants obviously missed Barkley big time over the last few weeks. But I think Barkley, he's going to play in this one. Season's 1-3 on the brink for this Giant team. And this Miami defense, I don't think is all that great. And if they want to get pressure off of Daniel Jones in this ball game, I think they're going to force feed Barkley a lot. And if pressure is in his face, they're going to dump it off a lot to him as well. So this week, coming off injury, I believe he will play. They gave him that extra day off on Monday Night Football. But now with the season on brink, I think he plays, and I got him 3. Number 4, Josh Jacobs to the Vegas Raiders. So Josh Jacobs, I know the numbers haven't been great, but a lot of receptions he's had so far in the early going in the season. And we know better running backs in fantasy football, and one of the best rushing running backs in the league, amongst the league leaders in rushing yards. So this week here, Monday Night Football, if it's Aiden O'Connell, once again at quarterback, they're going to rely heavily on Josh Jacobs, in my opinion. A lot of dump-offs, obviously a lot of carries, and he's a solid running back with one of the best workloads in the league. So I got him at 4. Number 5, Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. So Derrick Henry last week, a monster ball game and his best game of the season. 2 touchdowns, and he just steamrolled that Cincinnati Bengal defense. And this week, a good matchup at Indianapolis, a team that he's owned throughout his career. He pretty much has owned everyone in that division, is Derrick Henry. So this week, indoor game, always a plus. This Titan team, 2-2 on the season, trying to get to 3-2 with a division matchup here. And they're going to rely on Henry heavily because we know DeAndre Hopkins hasn't done much. And he'll not a good quarterback pretty much at all this season. And the offensive line really hasn't been good. So this week, another heavy dose of Derrick Henry. And I got him at 5. Number 6, Tony Pollard of Dallas Cowboys. So Tony Pollard, the last 2 weeks, the numbers have dropped off. And I know last week's game was a blowout game, and the week before they couldn't run a lot, trailing in that one. But now with Rico Dotto banged up, I think Tony Pollard's going to get just about all the workload here. I know they got Deuce Vaughn over there in Dallas as well, but he's not in between the tackles back. This week, a tough matchup at San Francisco. And this Cowboy team, they're going to try to grind it out with a lot of running, I believe, in this ball game, and a slow tempo offense to keep San Francisco's offense off the field and keep their defense tired. So this week here, I think Tony Pollard, the workload will be more, obviously. This will be a closer ball game, and I got him at 6. Number 7, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. So Brian Robinson this season, he's taken the next step. If the last season was his rookie year, we saw some flashes, but this year he's really played great football, and he's amongst the league leaders in fantasy points as well so far in the early going. So this week, Thursday Night Football, we know it's going to be a shootout, possibly with a lot of high-scoring games on Thursday night over the last few seasons and this season so far. And we know this Bear defense really can't stop anyone. So Brian Robinson, I have him at 7. Number 8, DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles. So DeAndre Swift, he's had some monster games so far this season. I know last week the Commander defense shut him down compared to what he was doing early in the year. But this week at the Rams, I think he could run all over them. We just saw a couple weeks ago Joe Mixon have a big game on this Rams defense. And they're going to be shifted on A.J. Brown and worrying about Devonta Smith, where I think the holes are going to be open in this one. And obviously Philly, one of the better offensive lines as well, especially running the football. So I got him at 8. Number 9, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't like the matchup at all here for Travis Etienne, but in terms of workload, catching the football out of the backfield, and the guy's been dependable for the most part this season. He's a running back that's going to crack this top 10 with all the bye weeks and the injuries this season, and the running back being a weak position. Etienne's at number 9. He's going to get 15, 20 touches minimum, we know, in this game at Buffalo in London, even though it's pretty much like Jacksonville's second home. And Trevor Lawrence played with him in college as well, so he relies on him. So this week, ETN getting the full workload once again. Tank Bigsby, he hasn't been a factor since week 1. And I got him at 9, number 10, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So Jonathan Taylor, the practice window is opened, and he's eligible to come off the injured reserve and play this week here. And I think this Colt team and Jonathan Taylor, they're trying to make amends and get back on the same page, with obviously the trades not being up to snuff with this Indianapolis Colts team, and teams not be willing to pay Taylor an extension as well. So this week here, possibly comes back. Division ball game, tough loss last week, coming back from 23-0 and falling short in overtime, 29-23. But anyway, they could use Jonathan Taylor, and Zach Moss has ran the football pretty well. So imagine Jonathan Taylor behind this offensive line, getting back to work. So right now, if he does play, I think he puts up decent numbers, and I got him at 10, number 11, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. So David Montgomery, he's the man over there in Detroit, no doubt about it. We thought obviously Jahmyr Gibbs was going to take over quickly in this backfield, but that just hasn't been the case. And Montgomery last week, over 100 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, a monster fantasy day. And this week here versus a Carolina Panther defense that really can't stop anyone on the ground, he has another good performance, and I got him at 11, number 12, Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. Achane quickly moving up the rankings the last 2 weeks. We know he scored over 50 fantasy points in week 3, and last week another solid ball game where he had 27 fantasy points. So right now, limited touches, he's averaging something crazy like 10 or 11 yards per touch. He is Devon Achane. He's a dynamic running back to catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's got the knack to run in between the tackles and make men miss. And we saw last week versus a good Buffalo defense, and this week here versus one of the weakest defenses in the league against the run, New York Giants. I think Achane has a big game once again, and I got him in 12. I know him and Mostert are pretty much splitting carries, but this is a dynamic running back that's taken the backfield by storm the last couple weeks. Number 13, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So James Cook, he's been a solid fantasy running back this season. This Bill team's built on passing the football, high-powered offense up and down the field with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis in the lineup, and Josh Allen showing the arm strength and even taking it himself. But James Cook, he's a 3-down back. He could run in between the tackles. He could catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's put up double-digit fantasy days in 3 out of 4 games so far this season. So this week with a good matchup versus the Jaguars, with Bijan Robinson went over 100 yards last week. I think Cook once again has a good game this week. Number 14, Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. So this Bengal offense obviously is in flux, but Joe Mixon still a running back getting a lot of workload this season. And this year, the way the running back position's been, you just got to go with guys who are getting that full workload and volume. So this week, it might not be the greatest of matchups at Arizona, even though their defense is beatable in the run game, but more in the passing game. I think this Cincinnati team could take advantage. But anyway, I got Mixon at 14, 15, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Stevenson and this Patriot team, they got blown out last week at the Dallas Cowboys where nothing was going in that backfield. But this week here, I think they get back to basics. They're going to run the football a whole lot, and this is going to be a grinded out type of matchup versus Saints, where both these teams are pretty similar in my opinion. So we know Stevenson's one of the best receiving backs out of the backfield, and that's obviously a big factor in PPR leagues. So this week, I think this Patriot team, like I said, they're going to emphasize running the football, and this is going to be a closer game, obviously, than last week. You will hope. Number 16, Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Jones came back from the hamstring injury last week, and he showed nothing, and he was on a snap count, but now to get 11 days off, pretty much another bye for this Packer team, and playing on Monday Night Football at the Vegas Raiders, where their defense really can't stop anyone on the ground here. I think Aaron Jones, he goes in there and he has a good ball game on Monday Night Football. He was one of the better receiving backs out of the backfield as well. And Jordan Love, they need to rely on the run a little bit more, because last week where he dropped back a ton of times, he just couldn't get anything going. So this week, yeah, I think they run a little bit more Green Bay, then set up the pass game. And I think Jones has a good one, and he'll be a little bit healthier as well. Number 17, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. So Kyren Williams, so far, he's come out of nowhere, and he's top 5 in fantasy points in PPR leagues at the running back position. So Kyren Williams last week, another big ball game. He went over 100 yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns as well. We know Ronnie Rivers got some work in that game, and Kyren Williams banged up as well. But I believe Kyren Williams, he's going to play in this game. And he's a guy with a massive workload, and he could do a little bit of everything as well. Catch the ball out of the backfield, running between the tackles. And this week, I know it's a tough matchup on paper versus Philadelphia, but we've seen some running backs go out there and have decent games. We saw Robinson last week, 13 fantasy points. versus this defense. So in week 1, Ramondre Stevenson have a good game. So this Philly defense, running backs can make plays on them, and I think Kyren Williams has a decent one at 17. Number 18, James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. So Conner's been a perfect number 2 running back for fantasy owners this season. And this week, he's got a good matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals, where their run defense really isn't that good. We saw Derrick Henry shred them last week. And this Cincinnati Bengal team going in Arizona runs the football better at home than it does on the road. So this week here with a good matchup and a home game for James Conner and the Cardinals in a game I think they could win after the Bengals have been on the ropes this season. I think Conner has a good ball game, and I got him in 18, number 19, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara, a great comeback game last week, 21 fantasy points in PPR leagues, and he had a whopping 14 targets in that one. So this is going to be a grinded out type of game in New England, but I don't know if Alvin Kamara is going to put up the same numbers like he did last week. 14 targets is obviously far-fetched, where you got other good weapons in this lineup, like a Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, who's been solid so far this season, G. Shaheed in this lineup as well. So right now, Kamara coming off a big game, but like I said, 14 targets, I don't see it happening again. And this week, he's a solid number 2 running back for owners. And I got him in 19, number 20, Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. So him and A-Chain, it looks like it's a split over there. But A-Chain quickly becoming the number 1 man. The way he's running the football and just the numbers he's putting up and making this Dolphin offense even more dynamic. So right now, Mostert's still a solid number 2 running back, in my opinion. A great matchup here versus the Giants that can't stop the run at all. And I got him at 20-21, Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco last week versus a good run defense of the New York Jets. He tore them up with a big ball game, including a 50-plus yard touchdown where he put on the Jets, and he was gone quickly in that one. So this week, a good matchup at the Vikings, one of the worst defenses in the league where you can run on them pretty easy. And this week here, I think Isaiah Pacheco goes in Minnesota, has another good ball game. Chief offense, wide receiver, very inconsistent, so they've been leaning on the run a little bit more, because like I said, they got a bunch of guys there that are 2 or 3 wide receivers, like Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, so they want to run the football a little bit more. Pacheco looks like he's 100% now from that surgery in the offseason. And I got him at 21-22. Breece Hall of the New York Jets. So Breece Hall, I'm big on Breece Hall coming into the season, but the problem is this Jet offensive line hasn't been good. The touches haven't been there, but I think Dalvin Cook is washed up, in my opinion, and pretty much it should be Breece Hall's time right now in the backfield here for this New York Jet team. So Breece Hall, not the greatest of matchups at Denver, even though we just saw Khalil Herbert run all over this Denver Bronco team. But I think Hall, if he's going to get 15, 20 touches, we know he's coming off the ACL injury, possibly not 100%. This guy could be a top 10 running back, but right now, road game, Denver, obviously the altitude's going to be a problem, I believe, for most of these players. And Breece Hall, we just got to see what the workload's going to be. He doesn't have more than 10 carries this season in a ball game. So I got him at 22-23. Damian Pierce of the Houston Texans. So Pierce, I thought, would be better this season, but so far he's been a touchdown-dependent running back. And this Texan team, I believe they're going to a throw-first type of team with C.J. Stroud being very impressive as a rookie this season. So right now, while Pierce has been touchdown-dependent, tough matchup with the Falcons that are top 5 in limited fantasy points to running backs this season. I got him at 23-24. Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears. So pretty decent matchup here for Herbert and the Bears versus the Washington Commanders in a ball game where we could see it obviously be high scoring, where most Thursday night games are high scoring. So coming off a 100-yard game on the ground, this team trying to run the football a little bit more. In this game, we could see it once again where it could be a close game and they don't have to abandon the run. I think Herbert gets a good workload, and I got him at 24-25. Alexander Mattison of the Minnesota Vikings. So the last few weeks, Madison's been playing better football for this Minnesota Viking team after that bad Week 2 game versus the Philadelphia Eagles. But right now, Cam Akers, he ate into the workload a little bit last week. This could be a game where they're going to have to throw a lot versus the Chiefs if they're down early and often is this Minnesota team. And to be honest, they're a pass-first team anyway with Cousins, Jefferson, Hockenson, and Addison. So this week, in a game script that might not be in their favor, and Madison been up and down running back so far this year. I got him at 25-26. Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. I had a lot of high hopes coming into the year for Jahmyr Gibbs, but every week it seems like 8-9 fantasy points has been his ceiling. So right now we know he had a good workload in week 3. He didn't really take advantage of it. 12 fantasy points that week. And then David Montgomery coming back last week and having a monster game, over 35 fantasy points. So this week here, I know it's a good matchup on paper versus Carolina, but Jahmyr Gibbs is a running back I really can't trust for more than number 2 low-end option or flex number 27, Miles Sanders of the Carolina Panthers. So Miles Sanders, he got out-touched last week by Chuba Hubbard, even though we know that game was a weird one with them and the Minnesota Vikings. And Chuba Hubbard's the better type of running back all around, the better receiver out of the backfield. He can help a young quarterback like Bryce Young with the quick checkdowns. But Miles Sanders, they signed him to a decent contract in the offseason. And in the ball game where I think they're going to be down early and often, where they might have to abandon the run, I'm going to keep it limited with Miles Sanders. And I got him at 27 this week, 28, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jaylen Warren, it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, before he's the main back over there in Pittsburgh. Last week he outscored Najee Harris. The game script was they were down early and often to Houston, losing by 24. And Jaylen Warren, we know he's a better receiver out of the backfield. We know he's got more burst in between the tackles and running the football. And this week here in a matchup where a lot of backups are going to be in there, with Pat Freiermuth out, Kenny Pickett possibly could be out, and we know Deontay Johnson's still out. Versus a tough Baltimore team, I think we could see a lot of dump-offs to Jaylen Warren, and a guy who's going to get a lot of work, especially if they're trailing in this one and from the get-go. 29 staying in the same game, Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. Much just Raven backfield, something most owners don't really want to be part of. J.K. Dobbins, I thought was going to have a good season, but obviously he's out for the year once again with obviously the torn Achilles. And right now, Gus Edwards looks like he's getting the majority of the touches, with Justice Hill to change the pace back and getting some work. So this week here, tough matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the better defensive lines in the league, led by TJ Watt. But Gus Edwards, we know he's good for a goal line touchdown every few weeks. So this week here, I'm banking that possibly he could get one, and he's still a starting running back. And with all the bye weeks, he's a flex option at best. Number 30, Samaje Perine of the Denver Broncos. So Javonte Williams, he's banged up and possibly could miss a couple weeks where he possibly could play in this game. But right now, after he got ruled out quickly in that Week 4 ball game versus the Chicago Bears, I'm going to say he's out this week. So Samaje Perine, we know, could do a little bit of everything in between the tackles type of running back, to catch the football out of the backfield. And last season, we saw him fill in a few games for Joe Mixon and that good games. I know this week a very tough matchup versus the New York Jets, but we did just see Isaiah Pacheco go off for a big ball game for them. So I know a lot of people ran to the waiver wire and picked up Jaleel McLaughlin after he had a monster game last week in limited touches. But right now, I still believe Samaje Perine is going to be the first and second down back for this team as Javonte Williams is out. And like I said, it's not a great matchup, but if you're desperate at running back, I think Perine could put up low-end number 2 numbers to flex option. And like I said, he's going to get the carries in between the tackles, with McLaughlin being a change of pace and getting a few carries and catches out of the backfield. Number 31, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So like I said, Harris, he struggled so far this season. Last week was his best game of the year with 11 fantasy points, but still, Jaylen Warren's been the better back, in my opinion. Harris, the explosion isn't there, and this offensive line isn't that great as well for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, even though Jaylen Warren, it really hasn't bothered. But this week in a tough matchup versus Baltimore, where they could get off to a quick start, Baltimore, and they got to abandon the run, where we know Najee Harris isn't a good receiver out of the backfield, really. I think it's going to be another long day for Harris, and I got him at 31, 32, Jaleel McLaughlin of the Denver Broncos. So McLaughlin last week bursted onto the scene. 7 carries, 72 yards, finding the end zone, and he had a few catches as well in that ball game. But like I said, this week in a grinded-out game versus the New York Jets, out of the game in the trenches here with Samaje Perine if Javonte Williams is out. And if Javonte Williams plays, then McLaughlin's back to third-string running back, because Perine's getting good money. They paid him in the offseason. They're not going to sit him on the bench. And like I said, McLaughlin, he's not in between the tackles type of running back. So this week with a tough matchup, and Perine, in my opinion, getting first and second down work, I got him at 32, 33. Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. Chuba Hubbard, eventually he could take over the starting role here for this Carolina Panther team. He's a quicker running back. He's a better receiving back out of the backfield. I know his pass protection isn't all that great, but last week he led the team in touches versus the Minnesota Vikings. And also Miles Sanders, he's not 100% as well, where he's been banged up a little bit and limited with a groin injury, even though he's played every game this season. So this week here, in a matchup at Detroit where the game script could be this Carolina Panther team is down early and often, and they're going to have to throw a lot and bringing in their third down back and passing downs back in Hubbard. He could be a sneaky play this week. And I got him in number 33, number 34, Justice Hill, Baltimore Ravens. So this backfield, like I mentioned with Gus Edwards, isn't that great or an ideal situation for fantasy owners. But Justice Hill, we know he can catch the ball out of the backfield better than Edwards. We know he's got some good speed, and he's a running back that if you get him open space, he can make some plays. And this week here in a ball game at Pittsburgh where possibly Edwards gets stuffed, and they're just going to abandon the run and throw to the running back a decent amount of times, even though we've seen Melvin Gordon get some work as well in this backfield. I think Justice Hill at 34 this week, 35 Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of people were worried the first couple weeks of the season about Bijan Robinson with Algier eating into his workload and even having some goal line touchdowns the first 2 weeks of the season. But Algier, he's really taken a back seat over the last few weeks here, but with a lot of bye weeks, and Algier is still getting a role on this offense, even though it's not a lot of touches. It's still a guy that cracks my top 36. Obviously, if there were no bye weeks, you wouldn't have is Tyler Algier, but he's still going to get his 5-8 touches per game, and you never know with Algier behind one of the best run block offensive lines in the league. So this week here versus a young Houston Texan defense in Atlanta, I think Algier could carve out a decent role possibly, and I got him at 35, and the 36 and final running back I'm ranking this week's Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. So Johnson, the first 2 weeks of the season got decent work, but the last couple weeks, Khalil Herbert has gotten the majority of the work, and he's pretty much just been a change of pace guy, getting a few catches and a few carries here and there. But this week here in a potential shootout on Thursday Night Football with the Washington Commanders, a defense that's a middle-of-the-pack type of day, even though I think there'll be a decent option this week, is Washington. I think Johnson could get some work. He's an explosive running back with good speed, and I got him at 36. That's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking for Week 5 of the fantasy football season.